What an amazing event we had so far, guys. Absolutely brilliant. We went from masterminds from CVS, Bayer, Gartner, everybody else on the previous panel. It was absolutely brilliant. I'm having a ball. Now we are cranking up the volume even more, I think. We have some amazing people that have just joined this next conversation. And we're talking about something that it was kind of touched upon by others in the other discussions that we had. However, we're bringing it more to the how institutions and businesses can actually work together to make sure that these purposes are real and it's not just greenwashed, as Augie Ray from Gartner mentioned it before. So we're talking about, the title of this session is going to be Making Purpose Real, What Corporations and the United Nations Can Do Together. We have some amazing speakers that I would like to introduce. We have Raquelle Zuzarte. She is a absolutely brilliant global brand marketer. We might know her as the senior vice president at the Washington Post. She has amazing experiences from Johnson & Johnson, Procter Gamble, Time Warner, you name it. And she is the founder of Equity for All and also a SDG ambassador, a Sustainable Development Goal ambassador. Now, while all these things are all really cool and important, probably the coolest thing to describe what she does is the fact that she is a creative screenplay writer, and she shots short films, and she's very talented at that too. So creativity and operations brought together to create excellence, which goes back to the conversation about having many skills to be able to make sense of the ever-changing environment around us. Together with us, we also have Dan Thomas. Dan Thomas and I met in Geneva many, many years ago when he was the Chief Communication Officer at Gavi. And he was changing the way NGOs communicated with journalists and with televisions all over the world. And he was investing in a process and in technology to bring those stories that are so important to us, from starvation, from education for all, accessible to everyone who literally had a TV set in their home. And today he's the Chief Communication Officer of the United Nations Global Compact. And I mean, what a better job you can have that help the world be a better place every day. Last but not least, we have Shivram is the global brand leader for Uber. And it's an exciting and a very controversial role at times, and it's absolutely brilliant. He comes from a very strong experience by being the Chief Marketing Officer at Jamba and also at Taco Bell. And he has an amazing family with 2 little kids and a lovely little dog. And he's one of the nicest people on the planet. But he wouldn't have been part of this talk if it wasn't like that. Now, as we introduced, we talked about in the journey that we had to get to this point into the event, we heard Norm tell us about stand up, stand out, and stand firm. These are the 3 pillars of communicating through purpose, according to him. And he shared with us how a purpose gives direction, not directives, which is a completely different concept. And I love that. That really resonates with me, and is going to be extremely helpful in this conversation here. And then we had Patricia from Bayer tell us how you don't experiment really with purpose. It has to be close to your heart and to the heart of your employees, as well as close to the heart of your clients. Why is that important? Because profits are equally important, like Augie said earlier on today. You cannot forget one or the other. This is the whole point. You have to be able always to produce a profit. And so with Augie, we talked about how some CMOs out there, thanks to this huge survey that was conducted, are reinventing a little bit too much. And his suggestion, the suggestion of the entire Gartner team, was to bring it down to basic and make sure that the things that we're working on, the stands that we take, are actually bulletproof proven. And so, what a better way to segue into our conversation right now, talking about bulletproof goals and purpose, to introduce Dan. Dan, can you tell us a little bit about more about the Sustainable Development Goals and your role at the United Nations Global Compact?
Well, thank you so much, Federico, and thank you to our audience for tuning in. So the UN Global Compact is essentially an initiative of the UN Secretary General to engage the private sector, companies all around the world, to align their strategies and operations with 10 principles which cover human rights and labor rights, protecting the environment and anti-corruption, and to accelerate and scale their impact on achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And as I'm sure you all know, the Sustainable Development Goals, as part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, were 17 goals agreed unanimously by 193 governments in 2015. They were agreed at the UN in the General Assembly Hall, but they're not the UN's goals. These are the goals for the entire planet. So we always encourage people to talk about them as universal goals for everybody to get behind. And clearly, to achieve those goals by 2030, which is the deadline, we've got less than 10 years to go, an awful long way to go, and we've had some really major setbacks because of COVID pandemic in particular, as well as the climate crisis and the inequality crisis. But the idea is to really harness the private sector, their sense of purpose, their desire to be playing their role as a responsible partner of a collective society in driving sustainability and principles, and to harness their interest and their power to achieve this extraordinary agenda, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, to lift countries out of poverty and really leave no one behind.
Thank you, Doug. We were just mentioning earlier on, as we said, there has been too much reinventing, and we need to focus ourselves on core values. Now, and we also touched upon, which is another important point that you kind of raised, the greenwashing of everything, or the pink washing, and you name it. Now, those who become part of the Global Compact and those who marry the Sustainable Development Goals as concepts, when they join the Global Compact, it's kind of impossible to do green or pink washing, because there are certain metrics that they have to adhere to, right, to be able to be part of it.
Well, I wouldn't say it was impossible, and marketers are very good at spinning a story to the benefit of the company. But I think it's fair to say that more and more companies around the world are recognizing their role in society as key actors, leaders in society, and their desire to really, be part of these solutions to make the world a better place for them and their families, a better place for their stakeholders, their shareholders, their staff, but also, for the entire community and their customers. So, I mean, there's an increasing desire for all private sector companies to really step up to the plate and to drive purpose in society. And at the Global Compact, we are, as I said, we're a UN initiative. We asked the CEOs of the companies that join our initiative to write a letter to the Secretary General promising to follow these 10 principles, to uphold human rights and labor rights, to protect the environment, and to fight against corruption. Those are the basic principles that we ask them to agree to. And then we work with them to help them set their own standards and goals around the SDGs, to help them set their benchmarks and contribute to achieving the SDGs things like, setting targets on equality and maybe a gender balance within the company, throughout the company, at the board level, the senior management level, that kind of thing. Making targets around their carbon footprint, becoming part of the solution to fight the climate crisis, making sure that they're ensuring that all of their staff are earning a living wage, for example, setting goals and targets around how they dispose of waste and pollutants, that kind of thing. So we have a series of targets which we encourage them to set, and then help them on their journey to become more principled and more sustainable, offering them the platform to communicate about that to society as a whole, to their stakeholders, to their customers and shareholders, and to the world in general. And we feel that by transparently talking about the targets that they've set, the journey that they're on, that will actually hold them accountable as they probably wish to be held accountable.
So you were mentioning how you take them through a journey in which their maturity to execute also evolves, because I'm sure that everybody starts with the best intentions, but then when the execution of some ideas need to be put into practice, well, not everything works at all times. And so this is a question that I wanted to ask to Raquelle. Raquelle, based on your very extensive experience that you have helping companies communicating through purpose, it's one of the things that you do best. If people ever ask me to describe you, I would say that that's probably your superpower. Can you share with us some examples that we can have as a shiny beacon of hope on how to do it well?
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank you, Federico, Ria, and the entire IMC team for putting on such an amazing learning opportunity for the students and inviting me to be part of that. I'm truly honored. The question around purpose and which companies are doing it well really comes first and foremost from a place of intention and a place of authenticity. Why are you doing it? What's your intention? And are you bringing into the story an authentic aspect of what your brand is? And so I've, had an opportunity to work on a number of brands. I'm going to give you, some solid examples of ones that I have admired. I have used as, if you like, benchmarks and blueprint for how to, how to think through these. So in the spirit of making sure that we are as visual as possible, I want to share this, a few examples, which hopefully are on your screen. I'm going to share 4 different examples, and then I'm going to share a thinking model of how to think through some of these challenges. On the left there is Patagonia, which if I've always seen that as a tremendous role model from the perspective of an origin story. The brand started really with a view to how to make actually mountain climbing more eco-friendly, and then turn into looking at what type of clothing would encourage people to love the outdoors. And originally Patagonia had a very long and complicated purpose that talked about best product, no unnecessary harm, solving the environmental crisis, but then it simplified it. And this is the magic that I think everyone needs to remember, is that, and going back to Patricia's earlier point earlier today about being true to it, you don't experiment with this, but you want to get to a distillation of your purpose in a very clear way. And basically today Patagonia's mission is to save our home planet. So Patagonia is in the business of saving the home planet. So, it's an example of a brand that was born in purpose, whose DNA at its very core is purpose. On the right is an example, 2 other examples. Everyone recognizes Like a Girl from Procter Gamble. I worked for Procter Gamble some years ago on another paper product, Pampers, but this is for Always. And this is an example of a purpose, if you like, that was driven not necessarily by like an origin story, because there always was a core story around, protecting and providing girls confidence, but over the years that got eroded because of competition. But another insight that came through was that how drastic that self-confidence, how drastically it falls at the onset of puberty for young girls. And so the campaign of Like a Girl, where Like a Girl was seen as an insult sometimes, or either boys and males using that as an insult, or girls themselves losing their confidence, turned into a calling cry for empowerment and true self-confidence. And the example of that is 76% of people looked at Like a Girl after the campaign as something that was much more positive. They had 85 million views across YouTube and all the platforms around the Like a Girl campaign, which I encourage you to watch on YouTube. And so it's an example of how you tap into the story, you craft a story, you distill it from a problem, the problem being lack of self-confidence. And then another example, everyone knows Nike, and we know how Nike was very bold 4 days after George Floyd's murder to be able to change their logo and not their tagline, to just do it. And they go, for once, don't do it. And that is something that is a real symbol of a brand that says, I want to make a statement and I will change, the tagline as I need to be consistent at the core of who I am. And the core of what Nike is about equality. That if you have a body, you're an athlete. And so they, really were able to, turn on its head the tagline and get to the core of the pain and suffering that so many people have been enduring in terms of inequality, and so consistent with the 2018 Kaepernick approach. So these are, the elements. Now, if I go to one that's a B2B example, SAP, where also this is an example of where you have to synthesize and think about your purpose across a business that is complicated. SAP, provides ERP, they provide supply chain, they provide HR systems, Qualtrics, customer experience, and they needed something to really be able to bring all that together into their statement, and here the real focus of their purpose around best run businesses help the world run better. And so you're seeing the way that these are coming through from different approaches, and for the purposes of thinking models and how to think about this. This is one of many frameworks. I've used this with my clients at Equity Project for All, to think through, like, where are you coming from? This is not mutually exclusive. You could be an originator and a disruptor at the same time, but it's really saying, the brands like Patagonia and Tom's and Warby Parker, we're born out of purpose. One pair of glasses for everyone you buy for those in need. Tom's with the shoes, Patagonia with their approach when it comes to recycling what you're wearing, and the wild outdoors. The story crafter, I use that as an example of brands that have had it, but along the way with competition, they needed to brighten up their purpose. And so they crafted stories based on insights. Always confidence of girls, Dove, confidence of women, Danone around the environment and natural foods. Disruptors is another group, which really comes from the Nike example, where you're willing to disrupt the status quo. Tesla with its sustainable EV vehicles in a luxury segment, and Google every day with its moonshots and experiments. And then so the other fourth one I want to give to you is synthesizer, which are complicated businesses that need some sort of purpose that allow you to then bring everything together. So MasterCard, complicated business because it's in the credit cards industry, across merchants, across small business, across enterprise, Microsoft, across search and across Windows and LinkedIn and a whole bunch of advertising platforms, and sort of distilling it to something simple is really, really critical. So I want to sort of leave you with the fact that purpose is an art and it's a science. The art part is knowing how to tug at your origin story. The science part is making sure the data and the insights support your story.
That makes perfect sense. Previously, in another talk, we chatted about the Dulux example that we had with, which I would recommend anybody to go check out, is what Dulux did in the favelas in Brazil. And it's an amazing story on how their internal team, their communication team, involved a lot of those people that are living in the favelas to first of all, learn the craft on how to paint their house so that they could go get a job. And was it born, Dulux, out of purpose? Not really, no. But they embraced something that they truly wanted to change, and they found a story that everybody within the organization could go behind. So it makes perfect sense. I absolutely love it. Thank you very much for your contribution, Raquel. Now, I wanted to put on the spot Shivram, if it's okay with you, and ask you, what is Uber doing on this specific point? What are you working on?
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Well, again, thank you for having me here. Really excited to be here and connecting with everyone that's here on our participants, as well as everyone on the call. You know, from Uber's perspective, our North Star, or our purpose, is how we reimagine the way the world moves for the better. And I think when you break that down, there's this idea of reimagining, but the purpose doesn't get reimagined every year. It's, you know, how we think about our business, how we think about our technology. We are a logistics company. We move people, we move things, we move goods. And so how do we make sure that we have a clear vision of all of those verticals that we can participate in? And then most importantly, how we do it for the better. And I think that for the better piece is incredibly important, because as a brand, we've always been a disruptor, but that disruption sometimes comes at the impact of our communities. And so making sure that we are thinking about our earners, our consumers, our merchants, our employees, our communities, and how we can continue to make things better in those areas is incredibly important, and helps provide us guidance on, you know, different ways that we can approach not only marketing and consumer communications, but how our brand shows up. I think, you know, when I look at a lot of the activations and activities over the past year, they really fall into that category of how are we helping, you know, the world move for the better. And that comes to things like partnering with General Motors to help set up basically our goal of going carbon neutral by 2030. And so if we're going to be emissions neutral by 2030, what are the ways that we can do that? It's working with partners to make electric cars more accessible. It's finding more infrastructure and helping to set up that infrastructure and make it easier for not only our earners, but also our consumers to access those vehicles and do their part as a part of this process. I think about our most recent partnership with Moderna, as well as with Walgreens, helping to distribute the vaccine, helping to provide education, as well as providing 10,000 free rides in underserved communities. So again, going back to this idea of, we know that there is challenge getting access to the vaccine, especially in a lot of underserved communities, not only in this country, but around the world. And so as that provider of logistics and as that connector, how do we make sure that we are doing our part to get more people educated on it, and then more people vaccinated as a part of the process? Now, that doesn't seem like a natural connection with Uber. Why is Uber partnering with Moderna? Why is Uber partnering with Walgreens? But again, it comes back to this idea of, how do we reimagine the way that our world moves? And we can't move until we all have this ability to move forward.
So there is an element, of course, of purpose. There is an element of organizing yourself as a business to become experiential, and not just box into, this is what I do and this is what I do. You're looking at it outside. You're looking at it from, I bridge gaps. I connect people and places in whatever shape or form that might manifest. Now, while some of my communication might revolve around the fact that you guys will be carbon neutral by 2030, and that's the goal, of course, but there is the tapestry of what you've just described is a lot more granular than just a big, massive statement. You have to become what you talk about. The complexity of managing such, because the way that I'm thinking from a marketing operations perspective is that it's like herding cats. They go in all sorts of different directions, right? Now, how do you think Uber or anybody for that matter could actually measure that success? I'm immediately thinking about Dan, of course, and the work that you're doing with all the Fortune 10,000 companies all over the world by helping them adhere to certain goals. But I'm asking to the group in general, how can those results being measured, not so much from a media perspective, but from a business perspective, because then it becomes a very interesting question. How are you doing it at Uber, or Raquel? How have you seen it done in terms of results?
I can start first. I think one is understanding that the impact that can be had, what are the right, basically KPIs that we need to look at from a brand perspective. And a lot of it is on impressions of the brand, right? It's on your sentiment of the brand. It's on, is this a brand that does good for the world or the environment, and having those key set of metrics and trackers that you can look at. I think also it has to come from internal, and it has to come from leadership on down, so that the organization can see that this isn't something that there's like some small group within the company that's trying to be altruistic and bring this to life. It needs to happen across the entire organization. And when you've got a company as large as this one, we need to make sure it is permeated through our onboarding. It is brought up in each of our projects. It is a filter that we look at when we are launching a new technology or moving into a new vertical or thinking about a marketing campaign. How do we make sure that it all ladders back up to our purpose, and that we are doing those things that are going to not only help the brand grow, but also help our communities?
When you said the internal spreading element of it, I couldn't help but absolutely jump on that specific point, because of the level of internal evangelization that I have seen Dan's team doing on those, with those that become part of the global compact. Dan, would you say that the first step that somebody that an organization that starts working on the basis of the principles and sends the letter to the Secretary General, they start with their internal people first? And tell us a bit more about that.
I think Shiv and Raquel have made it very, very clear that it's an all of company approach, but the leadership often does need to come from the top. And as I said, we are a CEO-led initiative, so getting the buy-in right from the top of the company is important. But at the same time, it's up to everybody who works in the company to be sort of part of the solution and to be buying in to the direction that's been set for the company. And increasingly, we're finding that many people who work for companies, they want to join this journey. It's one of the things that actually connects their own personal sense of purpose and commitment to making the world a better place for their children, their families, themselves, to connect that sense of purpose, whether it's something like you believe in gender equality because you happen to have lots of daughters, or you really believe in that, or you care about the oceans and the coral reefs dying because you like diving, or you care about climate change, and you want your children and grandchildren to be able to experience nature in the way that you were able to experience nature when you were growing up in some beautiful place. To connect those big ideas, which are really the sustainable development goals, to connect them to every person in the company, whether it's a driver or an accountant or a lawyer or a chief marketing officer, is just so important. And it's really great to see so many companies actually doing that, connecting their whole workforce and everybody who works in the company to that mission.
So without talking, please, Chevron, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I can't echo that anymore. I mean, people want to work for companies that have a purpose and are doing more than just, the bare minimum in terms of how we're connecting and improving the world that we live in. And I think that also goes back to consumers nowadays too. They are much smarter in terms of the decisions they are making and looking at, okay, if I'm giving you this money as a consumer, what are you doing to make this world a better place? And I think that becomes incredibly critical as companies start to think about their purpose and making sure that it's not just lip service. If you're going to say something, you need to make sure you're delivering on it. And I think doing that good, because we have a responsibility to do so.
If I may add, Federico, when we think about purpose, we should treat it just as urgently and as high up on the agenda as we would like $1 billion product launch. And it's not something we do on the side of our desks. It's not something we put a committee on. It's something that should be intrinsic to day-to-day business. And one important aspect is, thinking of it from an entire lifetime value or life cycle of your brand. And every time it touches something, even as you are developing the new idea to the, distribution, through CVS, if that's your distribution channel, like every touch point, and ask yourselves 3 questions. First of all, very importantly, ask yourself regarding the metrics question, what are the lead and lag metrics to help me know that this is working efficiently? What I mean by that is, lead metrics are things that are going to predict your success, and lag is ones you've actually done it. So lag is saying, okay, how many equal representation of talent, how much equal representation of talent do we have? A lead metrics would say, how often are we in campuses across the country at HCBUs and across, diverse socioeconomic areas. Those are the things that are the drivers that you can control, that can predict the outcome, and not wait till, wow, my goodness, we have a gender gap, we have a racial equality gap. So, looking at the entire journey of the brand, of the customer, asking those questions. Number 1 on lead and lag in terms of timing. Number 2 in terms of buy-in, which has already been touched on by Dan and Shivram and yourself, about making sure you have buy-in not just from the CEO, but every division and general manager head, and that they're walking the talk. And number 3 is interconnectivity. You cannot just have one division, let's say within a large technology company that's only in charge of new product and engineering, sort of focusing on it, while the customer success team does not. So timing and buy-in and having that connectivity and really applying your customer experience platforms, whether it's Qualtrics or any other platform you're using, and the same rigor will make sure that this is not a nice to have a flavor of the month, but something that you can deliver on from an ESG perspective to your shareholders, at the end of that fiscal year. And for the students out there, many of you may know the term environment, social, and governance, which is really a societal framework from which to think through outcomes that are financial as well as non-financial, that will impact people, planet, as well as product and financial results.
As we have seen also the CEO of BlackRock. We're talking about BlackRock, fund management organization, right? Right now, it escapes me how many billions, hundreds of billions they have under management.
5 trillion.
And, I'm sorry, yes, trillion. And his point was, we're going to stop investing in organizations that do not comply to X, Y, and Z. When the narrative gets to the level at which the CEO of a speculator, we can say that, however, an investor anyway, it means that it's truly gaining real momentum. You've touched on so many elements in your suggestions, from Shivram to Dan to Raquel. Raquel, can we share with the participants and the students the frameworks that the
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing I will say to our audience and to our future marketing leaders who are listening, nothing is sacred in terms of frameworks. There are frameworks out there that are still to be created, still to be built. And so what I would encourage is for all of us to, keep thinking about what are the factors that are endogenous or within the system that we can sort of control, and what are exogenous outside the system we can control. And to the extent possible, like put our arms around it. But to the point that you made, and so it's Dan and Shivram, is that it's not static. These are agile, ever-evolving organisms that keep changing based on what's going on. And of course, we've seen in the last 12 months that the world can change very quickly, and not only that, can adapt as needed. So as an example, and to get the conversation going regarding, thinking frameworks, I wanted to share, let's see. All right, I wanted to share, again, Dan, I took some liberties with our beautiful SDGs. Our UN experts created in 2015 a successor to the Millennium Development Goals, 17 beautifully crafted goals. And I wanted to encourage everyone to sort of look at it a little bit thematically, because 17 is a lot for our brain to handle in any one given challenge. So, if I made this, framework of 3 themes, you can come up with other ways in which you want to cut it. But the reason I think it's important is because as we think about purpose and purpose within companies, we know that it has to relate to something, it has to be a hook on something, and really very broad brush, human aspects of equality, of, having the ability to have food on the table, to have a roof over your head, to be able to have a healthy outcome and not have to worry about, simple aspects of daily living is something that's captured, through the human element. And in the human aspect, you'll see goal number 5, goal number 10, very much in discussion around equality in all its formats. And then, of course, is planet. And in the Sustainable Development Goals, we have such a beautiful expression of everywhere you look at planet, from everything from clean water, to looking at responsible consumption and climate action. And different companies attach themselves to different aspects, right? So Danone is all about ensuring, the equality and sustainability of food. And of course, Patagonia we talked about is all about, looking at climate action and life around the world, because it's all about, enjoying wildlife outside. And economy and society, we touched on SAP, where it's all about better run businesses means the world runs better. And Google, innovation and infrastructure. So broadly, you can map it. And the reason I bring this up is because sometimes you need a framework from which to go in and make change happen, in which to have the discussion. So this is kind of one lens. There's multiple others that, the teams can come up with. But what I wanted to share is a little tongue-in-cheek 4 Ps, not the 4 Ps that we're used to as marketers, but another variation that I've seen used successfully, and I've used successfully with clients and startups I've advised at Equity around, how to dig in for this purpose. And really the first one is, digging deep into your origin story. Sometimes you don't have to dig so deep. With Patagonia, it's pretty clear, and other companies where maybe they haven't had it live as prominently have to, go into the vaults or go into insights and really make it come to life. And we've seen wonderful examples of Dove, which is, since 2004, talking about the campaign for real beauty as an example. And then you need to define the problem clearly. What is the problem the purpose is trying to solve? So in terms of the problem, if we think about it from the perspective of, let's say, Warby Parker, there are 2.3 billion people who need glasses but don't have them, and about 600 million need them for productivity, to actually have a job, to do something that's productive for their lives. And so it's very important to make sure that you're pressure testing, you're analyzing and asking yourself those questions in terms of big brands like Always as well, that had to go back and find out, like, what's that insight? Wow, girls lose their confidence so dramatically, and it's so hard for them to get that to the level pre-puberty. So these were all based on wonderful customer insights that really, pressure test, what you're getting to in terms of purpose. And then of course, deliver consistently, which means you can't just adopt a purpose for the fun of it, or because you think it will, help your Instagram posts and your followers. You have to be consistent with your heritage, with what you've done before. Nike is an excellent example of that, because when Nike did what it did 4 days after George Floyd's murder, it was very consistent with the work they had done in the past. past. And then lastly, importantly, is to persevere and keep measuring. So, having the measurements, and there are measurements that have been industry recognized, like the gender equality measure, GEM, that the ANA has, endorsed, as well as SIM, which is the Coalition for Inclusive and Multicultural Marketing, which has also been endorsed. So there are some, what I would call kind of intrinsic measures on equality as an example, but then you need to make that work with the lead and lag metrics we talked about before, that's specific to your business and specific to that customer journey. And importantly, the 360-degree purpose ecosystem is really reminding us this is not just marketing's job. This has to be something that your CFO is as passionate about, your CIO, as well as the rest of the C-suite and the GMs running your business units, that everybody is working towards that. Something that Mary Barra, who is the CEO of General Motors, talks about is how they've, galvanized the entire very large motor manufacturing organization to actually, commit to zero emissions and zero congestions and zero crashes, and how that's actually coming through in the way they're making decisions, the way she spends time with people on the ground. I mean, it's complicated business, automotive, because you've got this dealership network, you've got the regional associations, and you've got to bring an entire machine together. And so there are some wonderful examples of leaders who are doing this really well. And I encourage everyone to think through what will be the model of the future, because this has to keep evolving for us to make an impact.
You're not passionate about this at all. This is what I am getting out of this conversation. It obviously transpires. And thank you very much for sharing this with us. I am just wondering if, Omar, I know we are coming closer to time. And so I want to ask you if there are questions from the audience that are coming. I have seen a few red bubbles popping up, and so I wanted to ask you.
Yes, thank you, Fede. Hello, dear panelists. My name is Omar Deacon. I am the chair of events and diversity at the Integrated Marketing Association. And well, I mean, from what I read in the Q&A, we have got amazing feedback. I feel you have brought us to a point where we all acknowledge that brand purpose stands beyond a nice statement or good intentions, but rather concrete actions for us business leaders and marketeers. In that sense, the first question is regarding the scenario post-pandemic. And basically it is, with the COVID-19 effect, do you see there is a permanent shift in how marketing will be managed now on?
Unfortunately, I lost it for a second. Can you please repeat the question?
Sure. If with the COVID-19 effect, after we finished going through this pandemic, do you see there is a permanent shift in how marketing will be managed within the organizations that you lead?
I think I can start. I think it actually, from the organizations that I've worked in and from what I've seen within the industry, I think it's actually going to make purpose even more important. We have now been through probably, one of the most challenging years across the globe that at least our generation has ever experienced, whether it came down to, economic challenges, illness, family stress, kids out of school. I mean, there's so much that has happened over the past year. I think it's going to make that alignment back to purpose even more important, because consumers can also see, how did these brands take care of their communities during this big crisis? Were they worried about themselves, or were they actually worried about helping those around them? And I think it's very important, and will continue to showcase the humanity of companies, of brands, of people. No matter how big the organization, it's, at the end of the day, it's the people that work at it, and it's the people that work for it that are the ones that are truly bringing these stories to life. And so the more that we can humanize that, the better.
If I may just quickly add to that idea, we found at the Global Compact, when we all went into lockdown, we had a lot of our companies were looking for guidance. No one really knew what to do. It was something new for all of us. business leaders were trying to figure out what is the right response. What should I do in this situation? It was an unprecedented situation for this generation. And we took it back to our 10 principles, as basic as they are, 10 principles around human rights, labor rights, protecting the environment, and anti-corruption. And in fact, we found that those principles were very useful to business leaders because, when things really go wrong and it gets into scary territory, essentially you've got to look deep within and figure out, what are your principles? What are your responsibilities to your staff? What are your responsibilities to your customers? What are your principles? What do you believe in as a company? And so that thought process is really, I think, as Shiv has said, it's really kicking off a whole new era where purpose and principle business is really becoming central to our way out of this pandemic, and also hopefully central to profitability and sustainability for companies going forward.
I agree, and you all have shared wonderful examples on how to bring those purposes to life. So that was really, really inspiring. So we are approaching to the end, but we have one more question that I would like to share with you all. So we have had, like a great diversity of panelists from different industries throughout the morning. How would each of you give, or what would be your advice to us students on the top skill sets that us as marketing professionals should be prepared to develop and develop further and put in practice while working for such great brands that you show us today?
Who takes that? This is a tough one. I can take it a stab first of all, and let's see what the others can think. Now, first of all, what I would suggest to students is to mentally divide it into two sections. One is the skills, one is the traits. In terms of traits, the traits that I recommend that you should have always is you need to be tenacious and you need to be curious. These two things together will naturally propel you to evolving through your career with as many times as you actually need. Why do I say that? Because eventually some skills become obsolete. Now, because of the technology advancement, because of the process changes, because of the legislation sometimes that you can't even do certain things. However, there are certain skills that I think that are fundamentally important, is the ability to quickly connect dots to create emerging strategies fast. Strategies are extremely important because it has become so easy for us to test and learn through digital marketing. Having an all-encompassing understanding of the overarching strategies becomes, it's a very, very important skill.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking note of it.
Yeah, I can try this one, which is, I think there's two things. One, you need to be a passionate storyteller. Marketing is all about telling stories, and I think that passion is important for the causes, for the companies, for the brands that you work with. It makes it a lot easier to tell a story when it's something that is true to your heart. And I think that's something that Dan spoke of before when we were talking about purpose. That's really important because you can tell stories that are true to you. And nowadays you need to tell stories in 6 seconds or less. So you have to not only be an adept storyteller, but you need to be able to do it quickly. I think, the best piece of career advice I can provide is, a mentor told me, what got you here will not get you to where you're going. And I think that world of evolution is something that you always have to keep in mind. The strategies you use to get you through college may not have worked in grad school, and the strategies you use in grad school may not work in your first job. And so that like hunger for learning, that hunger for change, I think is really important. And the world moves faster now than it ever has before. And so just be hungry, you know, be students of the game, and continue to, like, you know, be reflective of yourself in terms of what's working, what's not working, and be open to changing those to move forward, because that's what helps make, I think, great marketers. The industry is different every day. My job has never been the same 2 days in a row for the past 15 years. And that's what I love about it. But it's also why I have so many gray hairs. So you just have to be ready to adapt.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in as well. You know, there is a framework that has been used, you know, predominantly, I think, in the marketing circle, certainly within P&G and others, around sort of this concept of PIE, which some of you may have heard of, PIE, you know, performance, image, exposure. And just want to emphasize, you know, how important it is, you know, in terms of, you know, career acceleration and progression as being truly excellent at, you know, the task at hand, and ensuring that, you know, you are a brand, you're a marketer. So treat yourself as the most important brand, and ask yourselves, you know, how and where is your brand showing up? You know, are you able to demonstrate the skills that you know, are particularly great at, because it's about sort of differentiation, just like any brand, and saying, how do you, you know, differentiate in terms of how you show up when you show up. And then I think an more important other aspect also is, you know, surrounding you know, yourself with people that are authentic, that, you know, will support you on your journey, and those who will put a mirror to your you know, to you and say, hey, listen, you know, you need to improve on this part. And I have been fortunate to have mentors and sponsors who've done that, who said, you're either going, this is where you have to, you know, like brush up on, and they're very, very clear on what that is and very specific. And that's one of the biggest gift of all, is being able to have that feedback along the way, not just the yes men and yes women, but the ones who, you know, challenge you, question you, make you uncomfortable sometimes even. And I think that is, you know, a really, really important aspect in terms of ongoing performance. And another, you know, another one that we've seen that's been used in terms of finding that part of who you are is the Ikigai framework. It's a Japanese framework. Again, I'm sure you may have come across it in school already, which is really this intersection of like what the world needs, what you're good at, what you can get paid for, and, you know, all those things coming together. And so be perseverant, be passionate, and, you know, just enjoy the journey.
Thank you so much, Raquel. This is great. Omar, I know that we are a couple of minutes over.
Yes.
And
yes.
you are the big axe. Do your job, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You really leave us inspired with wonderful stories, equipped with great advice, and really excited about going out there and build successful but also purposeful brands. So thank you so much, Ibram, Fede, Dan, and Raquel. You really made a great session for us. So moving on, because this is not enough, we still have some a last wonderful session coming up. Tariq Hassan, the Chief Marketing Officer of Petco, will do that closing keynote on the event. So just move to channel 2 once the channel is closed, and see you there. And thank you, everybody.